So I read your LinkedIn post, I think maybe a month ago, when you summarized the story, with including the lawsuits and all of that. When you were setting out to build that company, did you expect this to go, this roughly?
That MongoDB is going to sue us? It's a tough question because first and foremost, we did something that obviously made MongoDB unhappy. They created the SSPL license to make sure that no one can run MongoDB as a service. And supposedly they did that to make sure that AWS, Microsoft, and the other hyperscalers and cloud companies will not be able to run MongoDB for free and then sell it as a service, which sounds like a good thing to do if you want to protect yourself by creating a license which explicitly forbids as a service usage. And the reason why we started FerretDB is to make sure that there is a way to run MongoDB in any kind of situation without having to adhere to the SSPL license, because we think that MongoDB started as open source. The users of MongoDB made the decision to go with MongoDB knowing that they are choosing an open source solution, and suddenly MongoDB pulled the rug from under them and created this license, which was initially called open source, but then the open source initiative did not approve the SSPL as an open source license. So we started FerretDB to have a MongoDB alternative on the market, which is truly open source. And we took Postgres and basically built a compatibility layer on top of it, which provided a degree of compatibility with Mongo workloads. This means that service providers are able to provide services that offer a degree of MongoDB compatibility without having to deal with the SSPL license, without having to open source or make their entire stack source available. And that obviously bothered MongoDB. I don't think we expected them to sue us, expected them to talk to us, but obviously that was not their plan.
Peter, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Mikko. Thank you very much for the invitation and looking forward to our chat.
Oh, pleasure is all mine. So where do we start? FerretDB, Percona. Let's start with FerretDB. How did you choose that name?
It's crazy hard to choose a name for a startup. I think I started a couple companies in my life. The first one when I was 13, and the name was always a problem. It's really hard to find a name for something you just started because you don't really have the identity of what you're building. You're just starting out and you have to name it right away. And so it's hard. And as you can see, FerretDB is definitely a unique name in a sense that I don't think anyone would expect a database company to be called FerretDB, although I can tell you that later we found out that to ferret out is actually to look for something in the English language. None of us are native, so we did not know that. We just got lucky. The reason it was named FerretDB is because in open source, actually, there's a lot of animals involved when naming things or as mascots. If you look at Postgres, they have an elephant. Hadoop is also an elephant, named after a toy elephant. And then there's MySQL's dolphin, and we thought we can have a ferret. Ferrets are cute animals, and I think it actually resonated very well with the community.
Fair enough. So naming is definitely hard. And by the way, I don't know if you know why there's dolphins in MySQL. I'm realizing I've never actually bothered checking that. So if you do know, tell me.
I knew why the dolphin, and I forgot. I remember I was on an Oracle meetup in Santa Clara, California, and I think they had maybe the 10th anniversary of MySQL, and they had this huge ice dolphin, like ice sculpture. And that's when I asked, hey guys, now I have to ask, why the dolphin? But I don't remember the answer, unfortunately.
Wow, the build-up, the suspense, and then no answer.
Yep.
Wow. Okay.
If I remember, I
Sure.
will. Maybe I will remember.
So I read your LinkedIn post, I think maybe a month ago, when you summarized the story, with including the lawsuits and all of that. When you were setting out to build that company, did you expect this to go, this roughly?
That MongoDB is going to sue us?
Yeah.
It's a tough question because first and foremost, we did something that obviously made MongoDB unhappy. They created the SSPL license to make sure that no one can run MongoDB as a service. And supposedly they did that to make sure that AWS, Microsoft, and the other hyperscalers and cloud companies will not be able to run MongoDB for free and then sell it as a service, which sounds like a good thing to do if you want to protect yourself by creating a license which explicitly forbids as a service usage. In the case of SSPL, it basically says that if you run MongoDB as a service, then you need to release your own software that is part of your infrastructure as SSPL as well. So it basically forces you to open up the source code of your entire stack, which is used to run MongoDB, which in the case of AWS would be catastrophic. I'm not sure if it would be catastrophic actually, because you really need the physical infrastructure as well to become a copycat of AWS using their stack. So it either requires you to publish the source code of your entire stack running MongoDB as a service, or you need to pay a license fee to MongoDB. And the reason why we started FerretDB is to make sure that there is a way to run MongoDB in any kind of situation without having to adhere to the SSPL license, because we think that MongoDB started as open source. The users of MongoDB made the decision to go with MongoDB knowing that they are choosing an open source solution, and suddenly MongoDB pulled the rug from under them and created this license, which was initially called open source, but then the open source initiative did not approve the SSPL as an open source license. So we started FerretDB to have a MongoDB alternative on the market, which is truly open source. And we took Postgres and basically built a compatibility layer on top of it, which provided a degree of compatibility with Mongo workloads. This means that you can run that as a service as well. This means that service providers are able to provide services that offer a degree of MongoDB compatibility without having to deal with the SSPL license, without having to open source or make their entire stack source available. And that obviously bothered MongoDB. I don't think we expected them to sue us, expected them to talk to us, but obviously that was not their plan.
There's DocumentDB, which basically did similar thing to what you did.
The story behind DocumentDB is that we actually started talking to several players on the market who already provided MongoDB alternatives, such as Microsoft. We had a partnership with Microsoft where we worked together in open sourcing their MongoDB alternative. They have a MongoDB alternative exclusively available on Azure Cosmos DB for MongoDB, which is also a service that provides a degree of MongoDB compatibility. So we sat down with Microsoft, and in a year or so, we helped them open source their MongoDB compatible engine or their Postgres extension that was basically the heart of their MongoDB compatible service, and we released it as FerretDB 2.0. And this extension is called DocumentDB.
And MongoDB is not suing them, is it?
We don't have any knowledge that MongoDB is suing them, and that's actually a great question. I can only offer my opinion here because I know that certain individuals will be very interested in listening to this podcast for other purposes and not just entertainment. So my personal opinion is that it is much easier to sue FerretDB, create precedent of it in US court, which is very much based on precedent law, and then they can go after the bigger fish like Microsoft or AWS. Suing Microsoft or AWS, especially on patents, is not a wise move, because I'm sure that the court case would not be straightforward when it comes to who violates whose patents. These corporations hold thousands or tens of thousands of patents, so they can just pick a couple and say, hey, you're violating our patents. That's their strategy, I think, in this situation. When it comes to FerretDB, obviously we can't do that.
Okay, so let's just rewind a little bit and just to play the devil's advocate. Like at the face of it, it doesn't sound too terrible, right? The SSPL, why was it such a big deal? And why was the Open Source Foundation not approving that as an open source license?
That's a good question. And I think lots of those having an opinion on the matter may not understand the full story behind the SSPL. The reason why the SSPL is not an open source license is because all open source licenses need to adhere to standards. So there is a couple rules which are distributed by the OSI on what open source licenses should all adhere to. Part of what we are talking about here is that when you look at the SSPL, it discriminates against use cases. And according to the OSI, that is not compatible with the spirit of open source itself. So any open source license you're looking at will not tell you who can run the software, why can they run this software, or why couldn't they run the software. Let's say if you put something in the license saying if you use this software to facilitate gambling, for example, then you can't run it. That's not open source. That's a license which discriminates against use cases. So when it comes to the SSPL, it discriminates against the use cases by explicitly telling you that if you run the software as a service, then you need to pay a license fee or you need to do something. That's not open source.
Fair enough. And what's your answer to the actual question of this hyperscalers and massive corporations are making money off other people's code, right? They either make it compatible, API compatible, or sometimes they run the whole thing. What's your view on that? Is that a good thing, a bad thing? Is there a better way of solving this issue that the clearly butchered SSPL?
If someone makes a profit on open source software without contributing back, that's a problem. The spirit of open source is that you take something and you give something. There are many ways to contribute to open source software. You can contribute with code, documentation, or you can even assign engineers who would contribute to the actual code full-time, like in the case of Valky, for example. These are all valid ways to contribute to open source software. And I think it's also in your interest as well. So let's say you're a hyperscaler and you're running XYZ database on your as part of your offering. If you're a contributor, if you take an active role in the open source project, that means that you can also steer the direction somewhat. You have an influence over what is going to happen in the open source project to some degree. Of course, you're not a maintainer at that stage, but your contributions will definitely move the roadmap further than it would get without you. And so that means that your quality of service is going to be higher. So for AWS and Microsoft, it's no accident that they have contributors to Postgres, for example, because they make a lot of money on Postgres, but they also want to make sure that the Postgres project is going to be successful. So if you're a large service provider and you don't contribute to the open source project you're using, you're actually missing out on a lot of things. And I think they realized that at this point. And of course, there are other projects which are not enjoying such large contributions from hyperscalers. And this continues to be a problem in the world of open source, where some projects which the entire world relies on are actually maintained by one private individual. And it's only when something bad happens we realize that this is the case.
Yeah, it's like in that meme we got like the Tetris stuff, and there's this one guy maintaining that library.
Yeah, it's a problem. I'm not denying that.
Yeah, 100%. I can think of a few examples also of NPM, when some of the super popular libraries got breached because somebody got like phished to put their password in there.
Yep.
Just another thing altogether. What's your view on like this? I'm thinking about like Linux Foundation and CNCF now, and previously Apache and stuff like that. What's your point of view on how that evolves the dynamic between all these companies who want to contribute and want to lead these projects that become super hot? Is that the right way of solving this issue of the governance?
I think foundations are fundamentally the right way to enable open source projects to become vendor independent and to equip them with governance that will make them sustainable and well managed. I would not single out any single foundation here. What I can tell is that sometimes I'm concerned that these larger foundations may not be inclusive enough and would only let large hyperscalers and large companies to sit at the table. They run some crazy expensive events, sometimes $2,000 for a ticket. You can't expect some maintainer from Austria or Hungary or Germany to travel to a foundation event, pay the $1,000, $2,000 ticket just to meet like-minded people and to be part of the conversation. I see that as a problem. And there are some other events like that, but those are not foundations like FOST or even the State of OpenCon in London, where you can actually meet lots of like-minded people from the open source community. But to get close to the large foundations, I feel like you need to work for a large corporation. And I just want to raise the question, is this the right direction for open source in general? I let the viewers decide.
But regardless of foundation or not, isn't that just a question of economics, that if there is enough financial incentive for these massive companies to throw their weight behind whatever this is, they're always going to get an outsized influence on the project? Can that really be avoided?
It's definitely on the large corporations to make sure that they understand their own weight. And whether they do understand that or not, that's really on them. And I think sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't.
Fair enough. AI is going to make all of our jobs redundant very soon, so the foundations will just set up a few agents soon.
I'm an AI, so I can't comment on that.
I knew it. Yeah. Drop program, make me a sandwich. Okay, what about Percona? So first of all, Jesus, that name, I only know it's Percona because consulting, per something consulting, not Persona. What are you guys doing?
Performance consulting agency, I believe that was the...
Performance consulting. There
Yep.
you go. Okay.
Yeah, because Percona had a focus on MySQL performance back then, and we made big strides, MySQL performance, and that's where the name really came from.
And why did you become the CEO lately?
So I started at Percona when I became the director of support in 2011 of Percona. That's when Percona started its support business. We started providing enterprise support for MySQL and later MongoDB and Postgres. I think I was employee number 30 or something. I joined very early, and I've worked there until 2015, and that's when we were 120 people strong. So the company grew a lot, and when I left, it was entirely different than it was. And I did leave because we wanted to start something new. We wanted to start a different business, which was also focused on providing enterprise support for other technologies. And the reason I'm back is because after I left, Percona really started to try and find its focus. So we were extremely successful with services. We grew our revenue to tens of millions of dollars just by providing services. But there was this buzz around as a service and cloud and products in general. And so Percona attempted to foray into these markets and these categories. And the reason I'm back after 10 years is because I'm a services person, first and foremost. The founders and the management thinks that we need to do what we are best at, which is providing services that are not tied to any single technology. If you take a look at some of the other database companies who provide support and consulting, they are mostly focused on one technology. For EDB, it's Postgres. For MariaDB, it's MariaDB. But when it comes to Percona, we are technology agnostic. We don't like sticking to one solution for multiple problems. So if our customers come to us and ask our opinion on what would be best for this database workload, we can have an unbiased opinion on whether that is Postgres, MongoDB, or MySQL, or anything else that would suit the best. And I really like this concept. I think this concept is the most compatible with open source values, and I think that using this approach, we can stay true to these values, and I just wanted to be part of this again.
That makes sense to me. All right, so let's start unpacking this. So let's take a look at MySQL. We've got MySQL that was acquired by a certain large company in recent history. We've got MariaDB, that was the open source fork, right? As far as I understand, almost entirely compatible. Then you've got your, what I would probably describe a little bit like distro, right? XtraDB, which comes with, but also there is the Galera library that does the replication slightly differently than like the MySQL group replication would. So I get that let's not have one solution to all the problems, but why do we have three different flavors already off the top of my mind of effectively the same database? Why is it a good thing?
Sun Microsystems acquired MySQL, and as far as I know, it had a really good life under the Sun logo. And then Sun was acquired by Oracle. And so Oracle MySQL was basically tainted by the Oracle brand, because when it comes to Oracle, what comes to our mind is not freedom, is not open source. Although Oracle started as an alternative to IBM's proprietary databases, and Oracle was the savior of IBM users, They saved IBM users from vendor lock-in. That's a lot of irony here because now Oracle is very much into proprietary stuff. And then due to the Oracle acquisition, I think lots of things changed. For example, the community had less control over the project. Oracle was setting the pace for MySQL development. And I think the reason why Percona had a place on the market is, first of all, we were able to increase the performance of MySQL. We also fixed lots of bugs. We introduced features in Percona Server for MySQL, which Oracle MySQL did not consider to be important. And so Percona Server is now rolling all of these enhancements with itself over stock MySQL community. And these features they resonate very well with the needs of our customers. On why we need so many flavors, first of all, why not? That's really the part.
That's always a strong argument.
But if you think about it, that's why open source is great, because you have something that forms the foundation, so you don't have to reinvent that. And then you can figure out how to enhance these, how to create different flavors, which will be the best solution for some people and another flavor for other kinds of users or workloads. So I'm sure that MariaDB, Percona Server, and all the other flavors out there would solve problems to users that the MySQL Community Edition would not be able to.
But why not contribute like your improvements, for example, to MariaDB?
There's different roadmaps and different appetite when it comes to accepting those enhancements. I think that would be the main reason. In the case of MariaDB, MariaDB is liked by many. I think it's also part of number of Linux distributions as one of the default databases.
Default, yeah.
The thing with MariaDB is that it also comes with features on top of MySQL that MySQL never had. So as soon as you start using those features, you're going to have to stick to MariaDB eventually. Of course, if you just use the baseline features or the CRUD operations, then you basically have MySQL. But the more you get into it, the more you may find yourself in a situation where MariaDB is your only choice. Whereas with Percona Server, you could migrate to MySQL Community and you might lose some of the performance improvements or bug fixes or some other options that are available, but ultimately you would not be in a vendor lock-in situation.
Okay, that makes sense. I always wonder about these forks, how the adoption works. I'm thinking about Terraform versus OpenTofu and Redis versus Valkey, and here MySQL versus MariaDB. You've been in this environment for much longer. I'm wondering, do this always pick up? Do people choose them because of the values and beliefs, or do people tend to stick to what they know by just continuing with the version that they know they've used before? How does it usually play out?
I think it depends on the type of user we are talking about. So when it comes to enterprise users, they rarely operate on beliefs. They pick one technology or one software, and I think they tend to stick with it because they have to do a lot of exercises internally to actually end up with something they can use. They have contracts for support, and they have processes, and they have people who are well versed in that given technology. And then there are smaller companies or hobbyists who are more inclined to choose a fork based on beliefs. But sometimes you don't have the luxury to choose based on beliefs. For example, lots of companies and government agencies have a policy that they have to use open source software. And so when Redis changes the license, for example, and they did it twice to SSPL and then back to an open source license, these users had to find a solution, and the solution was Valkey, because that had an open source license. So this rug pull of changing the license does not always trigger feelings only or beliefs, but more policies these organizations want to adhere to for a very good reason. They want to escape vendor lock-in. Now, another part of the story here is that can they move to Valky? Can they move to the alternative? And sometimes the answer is no, because there is a feature gap, for example, or some other considerations which makes it impossible to move. And in this case, it's really tough situation.
Can you think of an example where the fork became the default and ended up dominating?
I think OpenSearch is pretty successful. I'm not sure if you could call it the default. I don't think that Valky is there. When it comes to the HashiCorp decision, I would say that the original product is still more popular, but I do think that these forks with the proper governance will get there.
Okay. All right. So back to Percona. Is it just MySQL that has like a special distribution that you do, or do you also have a specialized version of Postgres and Valky and stuff?
Oh, with Valky, it's a very new venture, and we are still figuring out how is that going to work in the future. We are committed to it. We contribute to it, but I think it's early to tell what would be the best way for us to participate in this in the long term. Postgres, we are releasing Postgres related enhancements like TDE. And for MongoDB, we have our own flavor, Percona server for MongoDB, which is SSPL license, which actually not my favorite topic. With MongoDB, the server software itself is SSPL, but we are building enterprise functionality and backup and all sorts of other solutions which are open source and which enhance MongoDB server with tools which are not released under the SSPL but under an open source license. So far, this is how Percona can help the MongoDB community.
Okay, makes sense. Is it me, or do we get more of this rug pulls lately?
I'm actually very optimistic, because if you think about it, let's talk about SSPL, because that's, I think, a very good example. SSPL, when SSPL appeared and it was first created by MongoDB, the narrative was that we need to fix open source. We need the new generation of open source, which is compatible with the cloud, which is compatible with this new era of moving our workloads in the cloud and hyperscalers monetizing software. And it was MongoDB and Elastic and I think Graylog, maybe, and later Redis, who all moved to the SSPL license, believing and try and make others to believe that open source needs to be fixed. And if you look at the current situation, Elastic changed its license back. Redis changed its license back after just a year, I think. So although many companies were looking at fixing open source, I think they realized that they are not solving a problem here, because they started marketing their software as open source. And this was one of the selling points here. And so when they changed the license to something non-open source, and if they make service providers unable to provide that software as a service, that means that they shrink the number of possible service providers to the ones that have a license, which means that they actually create a situation where for that particular software, you can only get service from, 3 providers for an elevated price. And users don't like this. And so whenever the license change happens, I think MongoDB's popularity is not exactly increasing at the moment because it's no longer a compelling story to users.
Hey, what happened to CouchDB? I remember that being a thing, and now I just remember I haven't heard about it for years.
I think CouchDB is still alive.
Still around.
Yeah.
Still kicking. What's an open source project that we all should be following that we might not be following?
Well, you know what? My personal opinion on this is that smart homes are going to be a thing more and more. I really like the Home Assistant project because Home Assistant ties all of these proprietary solutions together for smart homes, and the smart homes are no longer a luxury. It's very likely that you are going to get an appliance which comes with an app and comes with an API, and whether that's a dishwasher or washing machine or a lamp or a smartwatch or whatever else, you can actually do pretty nice things with Home Assistant, like automation or just making your life easier. So personally, I really like Home Assistant because that's a very good example, if you want a good example on how open source actually helps society or you as a person to live a better life. We are talking about databases here, and we are talking about infrastructure software, and it's very hard to explain this to someone who is not really into these things. But when you show them a project like Home Assistant, and you can say, hey, with the power of open source and with APIs, instead of handling all your daily tasks with 6 different applications on your phone, you can just use one, and it will not get updated or bastardized in a way that it's going to be unusable tomorrow, as for example the application of my air conditioner, but it's going to make use of the APIs that the manufacturer provides, and you will be able to use it in a way that you want and what's best for you. And I really like the Home Assistant project because it's closer to people than databases and infrastructure software.
That is, unless you're like me and you actually paid extra to not have Wi-Fi on your washing machine because you didn't want it hacked.
Yeah, of course, there are considerations like that, and I absolutely not encourage anyone to buy a Wi-Fi enabled washing machine, but sometimes it helps. It's just so great to have one switch for all your lights in the apartment, for example, and then you can go to bed without having to go around and stuff like that. I think there are reasons to have smart stuff in your home, and if you do, and if you like open source, that's where Home Assistant comes to the picture.
100%. Solid recommendation. Peter, as the CEO of Percona, what's the one message that you want people to hear listening to this conversation? One thing that they need to remember about databases?
About databases, what I would say is that it's extremely important to choose a technology which would not make you end up in a vendor locking situation. It's great to see all of these cloud-based developer platforms that are very easy to use and, of course, easy to start up with. But when your workload is going to get bigger, you will find that the features you've built your entire solution on would only exist in those platforms. And then you are totally tied to the cost structure or the offering of said vendor. I think this is what Percona stands for, to help users avoid these situations.
Very nice. It was a pleasure talking to you. Thanks so much for coming, Peter.
Thank you very much as well. Thank you for the invitation, and I'm looking forward to feedback from anyone who watches the show. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to talk. Thank you very much, Mikko, for the invitation.
Thank you.